Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Lordi, limited Deadition, out March 21st on Reigning Phoenix Music. This album has 16 tracks, 45 minutes in length, and this is the band's 19th full-length studio album. They are a Finnish rock band. Now, as far as this album goes, I think I can say that this is a concept record. At the very least, I can say that this is a theme album. And the theme concept of this album is the 80s and everything that comes with it. The toys, the movies, the TV commercials, wrestling, and obviously music. This album sounds like a pure product of the 80s and everything that was around that time. From heavy metal to arena rock and roll, to just classic hard rock to hair metal, this album has a little bit of all of those elements in it. Now, from a pure track listing standpoint, this album has a lot of interludes. There's a lot of interlude tracks that really break the fluidity of the album. I enjoyed the interludes because they're funny. They reminded me of things of the 80s, like toy commercials, like He-Man toy commercials, or like wrestling promos, things along those lines. So I enjoyed the interludes, not necessarily for what they gave the record, but for what they reminded me of. I feel like these interludes could have been better connected with the song that follows. So if you're gonna have an interlude about toys from the 80s, having a song that follows that completely connects with that theme would make a lot more sense from an overall record standpoint. The other thing that I felt like the interludes could have done better or could have been better is if this album had an outro. You have an interlude or an intro track, then you have all of these interludes, but there's no outro. And if you go back to that time period, if you go back to the 80s, TV wasn't around 24 hours a day. You cannot watch TV 24 hours a day. TV would start at a certain time in the morning and would finish at a certain time in the evening. At least for me, where I grew up and where I come from. So having an outro that kind of would end the transmission would make a lot of sense. And I think that would put, once again, like having the interludes connecting to the songs, that would make the overall album experience a little bit more cohesive, and it will allow the experience to be more engaging overall. Because the way the album sits now, you don't really need to listen to it from start to finish. You can take any of these songs in any order, listen to them at any given time, and the tracks work on their own. It's fun to listen to the record from start to finish because the interludes add a certain humor and definitely give you a certain flashback to that time period that you're definitely going to connect with, specifically if you were a child of that period. So there is something to be said about how the record feels as a whole, but I really feel the way it's put together, it doesn't force the listener down that path. It actually allows the listener to just take and pick and choose which songs you want to listen to and then just go with those. So I think the overall design of the album could have been better to almost force the listener to listen to the record from start to finish so that the overall theme could come to life. As far as the sound is concerned, I already mentioned, this is an album of the 80s. The sound on this record has definitely that arena rock, hard rock, heavy metal, metal, hair metal. All of those 80s influences are alive and well on this album. Even some of them outside of the rock world still play a role in how this album comes across. Some pop rock, some synth rock, new wave, all of these genres that had a foothold in the 80s are represented throughout these songs on this record. So this makes for a very bright sounding album. It is a fun record from that perspective because you can do a lot with these genres and create songs that have almost a life of their own. And this album definitely does that. And the other aspect of this record that I enjoyed is that when you normally think of the 80s, you think about a lot of synths. Synths were massive in the 80s. I mean, they're massive now as well, but they were massive in the 80s. So this album, while using a lot of keys and using a lot of synths, you still feel like this is a rock album through and through. The guitar sound, the drum sound still plays a massive role on these songs, on this record. And that to me is an important aspect to it. Because you can still have that 80s influence and use those synths to create that atmosphere, that vibe, that sometimes Miami Vice style feel to a song, but not necessarily do that at the cost of removing a little bit more heaviness, a little bit more drive, a little bit more push, a little bit more power when it comes to the drum sound or the guitar sound. because the drum sound and the guitar sound on this album is really good. I love the production behind it because it allowed all of these elements to coexist in a very defined way. It allowed the songs to have a very specific imprint of what genre from the 80s is influencing that track. If you close your eyes and you listen just to the sound, you can almost imagine a much different band from that time period writing this song, playing this song. So the sound on this album is really interesting, and it has great quality throughout, and it's not easy to create a record that captures the essence of the 80s when the 80s were so diverse as far as sound is concerned. This album does a wonderful job capturing that essence, capturing that vibe, but like I said, still giving a huge predominance to the drum and guitar sound. The guitars on this album have such energy that you see that in the melodies, you see that in the riffs, you see that in the way they drive the songs, you see that in the solos. It's an album that, while not being necessarily a virtuoso guitar sounding record, is still an album that offers so much to the fans of that more pure rock and roll sound of the 80s as far as guitars are concerned. And I think that is also an important aspect of the overall performance of this record. I like the drums, but the drum sound is there just to kind of give the record a little bit of substance. I actually would compare the overall keyboard and synth sound in terms of the quality and what it offers to the album, the impact that it has in the atmosphere of the tracks, in the vibe, and the theme of the songs. I would compare it side by side with the guitars. These two elements have such an importance throughout the entire album. While I feel like this is more perhaps of a guitar-driven record, we cannot underestimate not only the quality of the keys and the synths, but the impact that they have on these songs. Then when it gets to the vocals, the vocal performance as far as Mr. Lordi is concerned is very consistent from beginning to end. Not that I was expecting anything else. That's what you're going to get, and that's perhaps what everybody's expecting coming into the album. The aspect of the vocals that I thought was really well placed for this specific record is all the backing vocals, the choirs that they use to give the tracks a little bit more size, to give the tracks a little bit more presence, to almost make the tracks feel like they are not necessarily a soundtrack piece, but a commercial or an intro to a show or to a movie type score. And that is really important because the sound is there, the ambiance is there, but the vocal aspect is really important. If you go back to the 80s, to TV shows, to movies, there was always a lot of emphasis on the vocals and the catchiness and the hookiness and backing vocals and having a group of backing singers. All of that stuff is very 80s, and this album has a lot of that on the vocal lines, and I think that's an important element as well, to bring the songs to life, to bring the themes to life, to bring the lyrics to life. Overall, a super fun album, an album that's definitely gonna resonate with an audience that was perhaps in their teens during the 80s, more so than a new generation that heard of the 80s, kind of has an idea of the 80s, but didn't live the 80s. This album is an absolute time capsule for those of us that experienced the 80s in our teens. Now, as far as favorite songs are concerned, my favorite song on the record, Legends Are Made of Clichés. This track is phenomenal. Why is it phenomenal? First of all, the lyrics is about cliches in horror movies. How many times have I watched a horror movie with someone around me, like my son for example, and I'm saying to him, dude, if they heard the sound in the basement, why are they going there? They're going there because that's the cliche in horror movies. You hear a sound and you go to investigate and then you end up dead. So this track is all about the horror movie cliches, specifically those that were created in the 80s. And I love the way this song sounds because think about horror movie cliches. Think about one of the biggest horror movie franchises from that time period, Friday the 13th. That spent I don't know how many decades now. So this track has a little bit, especially from a key standpoint, the way the song opens, it actually sounds a little bit like Friday the 13th opening soundtrack, and that plays a role in the theme of the song. So really matching an 80s sound that you can go back to with the theme of the song. They do this throughout the entire album and they do it extremely well. I love this song. I love the catchiness of the song. It's super hooky, very melodic. It has like that fun aspect in the lyrics as far as the cliches in horror movies are concerned, specifically 80s horror movies. And I love the backing vocals. This is one of those tracks that uses the backing vocals to add atmosphere, to add size, and I think this is going to be an instant Lordi classic. Then you have Collectable, a rock ballad, a ballad about haunted collectibles, haunting dolls, which is a very common theme in horror movies as well, not only in the 80s, but even now when you think about, for example, The Conjuring. So this track, at times almost sounds like a Christmas song. It has such love to it. It's such a warm, stripped down song, really allowing the keys to paint a picture, creating a momentum. A great rock ballad in terms of ballads that you could think of, like REO Speedwagon or Boston, bands like that. This song has all of those condiments because it still uses the guitars in a very warm, classic way, but it allows the keys and the pianos to be the ones that really drive the experience with the vocals on top of that. But a very warm track all around. The choirs in this song definitely give it that Christmas aroma that I mentioned, almost like a Christmas carol or a Christmas commercial style thing. Like if you're buying a doll for your daughter and this is the commercial song, the jingle, if you will, that commercial would have. It's just that the doll happens to be haunted. So really well put together, all the right pieces in the right place. Great track. Last but not least, Fangoria. I love this track because of the bass sound. It's one of the few tracks on the album where the bass sound really pops through, has a predominant role in the experience. It's more of a rock synth sounding song, so it has a little bit of new wave to it, if you will. Think about of bands like Fine Young Cannibals, for example, or Depeche Mode. It has a little bit of that feel, a little bit of that sound to it, but it also then takes you into a more Poison, Rat, hair metal, Twisted Sisters style sound. So it's a track that kind of has a little bit of an evolution to it, and when the dust settles, it definitely feels a lot more like a hair metal song than it does like a new wave song. But there's pieces of both, perhaps more of hair metal in this track, which makes for a super fun sounding song. I love this track as well. This is it, Lordi with Limited Deadition, out March 21st on Reigning Phoenix Music. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.